Yeah, it was weird. I've never been one to have like a home gym or anything like that. But I found a way just to get used to it. I had to, was able to get by with just a few weights and some bands, and was able to stay pretty much completely in my program of where I wanted to lift, both upper and lower. And so was able to do everything I needed to be able to do to keep myself physically in shape, to be able to come back whenever the season was going to start and be ready to compete.
Next up, Mark Zuckerman, MASNsports.com.
Hey, Max.
What's going, Mark?
What were the emotions like coming in here the other day, and what these last couple of days have been like? And you spent the last several weeks learning what the protocols were going to be. Now that it's actually trying to be putting into practice, what has that been like? And does it feel doable? Does it feel more daunting than you thought?
It felt weird coming in. Everything. I mean, it feels like an eternity since we were at spring training. Just so much has happened in everybody's lives since March, and so to be able to actually have the season get going, it was a sense of relief, kind of to be able to get back in, get back around the guys, and start ramping back up with the season here right around the corner. That's the weird part in this, is that we're going to be playing our first game in 20-something days. So you got to get ready. You were hearing about the protocols and everything that was going to be happening. Until you actually get in here and see it, it's extensive. Just everything you got to do. They're thinking about every little thing. We're wearing masks, everywhere inside, keeping distance, keeping some groups small right now. You can't really touch anything. They even have the bottled water. It's out. It's warm, and they can't even get in a fridge. So they've really thought of everything of how to mitigate the risk here. So for me, I feel very, very safe of being in this clubhouse, given the testing that we have as well.
Next up, Jesse Doherty, Washington Post.
Hey, Max, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Obviously, you like competing, being around the guys, playing baseball as much as anyone. Given how the last few months went with negotiations and all the labor, strife, so to speak, is there any mixed feelings coming in? Can you feel totally good about this? Or I guess how do you balance those emotions?
I'm confused. The negotiations and emotions, like with baseball, I'm confused by your question.
So just that, like, obviously you seem happy to be back on the field, but does any part of like the frustration of the last couple of months carry into that as well? Like, do you have any mixed feelings right now of just how in the state of the sport and sort of how this return plan, how it unfolded and how it came about?
I just wish we were playing baseball today, July 4th. I think that was possible. And the fact that we weren't, that was a failure on a lot of different levels. So other than that, I'm just happy to be back, that we are going to have our season and continue to go. So that's all we can do. You can't cry about it. So just go forward and just meet every challenge that we can and go out there and get ready for the season.
For sure. We've also seen some owners in recent days mention the possibility of having fans this year. I know that was maybe something that came up as the reason for restarting negotiations, that they said, no fans in the park changed things on their end. So how does it sit with you that that's now sort of becoming a discussion, the possibility of fans? Does that feel odd, or is that, I don't know. How do you sort of parse that?
To me, it seems totally possible that could happen.
Okay.
Obviously not at full capacities, but if fans are in here wearing masks in outdoor stadiums and being socially distanced, I understand where the owners are talking about of having that be a possibility and what that would look like. So obviously they know best of how they would actually go about having a process of bringing the fans into the stadiums, but when I hear that's music to my ears as well, because playing in front of empty stadiums is not something that I want to do. I'd much rather have fans in the stands.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next up, Jessica Camerato, MLB.com.
As a pitcher, what do you think are going to be the biggest adjustments that you have to make, whether it's warming up for a game or in game, to follow all the safety protocols?
As of right now, I don't know what the safety protocols are going to be during the game, other than that I can't lick my fingers. I've worked on trying to just touch the back of my hair to try to get some sweat, to get some moisture on my fingers. Other than that, I'm not sure what other actual game day protocols are going to be actually in place. So hard for me to answer that question.
Next up, Brittany Giroli from The Athletic.
Hi, Hi, Max. I'm wondering what your reaction was when you heard that some of your teammates were opting out, and you've seen it in other camps, guys like Mike Trout and around the league, I guess, guys kind of talking about how they want to play, but there's obviously this big, huge, like, if it's going to be safe, if it's going to be right. I'm wondering how tough that is to balance with still being competitive and still having a 60-game season.
Yeah, everybody has their own decisions about how they view the risk here, because inherently you can never get to zero. That you just have to. I mean, that's just the reality of this, and how you view the risk and how you view it with your family. That's everybody's personal decision. So, however somebody personally comes down and how they view it for the safety of their loved ones, I mean, that at the end of the day, that's their own personal choice. I only can only speak for myself, and for me, how I view the testing. I guess that's where, being a part of the union and the subcommittee of getting to see really the efficacy of the saliva test that we have. It's better than the nasal swab test. And so, reading those studies and seeing that they can detect the virus at a higher rate, really to me alleviates a lot of fears for me on my end, and especially for my, for my wife and my kids as well, that I wouldn't be necessarily bringing it home. Because the testing is going to be happening at a frequency that should provide the answer to the result that if I were to somehow contract it, that be able to test for it at an early enough stage. So for me, the testing is such a huge aspect to this of restarting our season, and the test that we do have seems to be at a very high rate of efficiency of being able to, or I should say, a high accurate test. So that we do, that I do feel safe about going into a clubhouse and knowing that everybody else is tested multiple times negative to really curtail any possibility that somebody could have it right now.
Next up, Todd Dybus, NBC Sports Washington.
Any further about what you want to do with the rings and the ring ceremony and a banner now that there's an actual season here and that process may be possible?
Yeah, we all are trying to wrap our heads around the right way to do that. Because that is a special moment. I know other players in the past have told me how awesome that is to be able to share that with everybody. You definitely want to share it with the fans. That's the most unfortunate part here is that it doesn't seem like we'll have fans here for opening day, and to not have the fans here to be able to partake in that seems to lose a little bit of its luster. But at the end of the day, if we can get all of us together and make sure that we have a ceremony together to commemorate that, I think that's what matters most.
Next up, Jesse Doherty, Washington Post.
Max, Davey mentioned you threw 65 pitches yesterday, faced some hitters. How'd you feel? I mean, I imagine you've been working out pretty consistently, but was it any rust? I mean, just generally physically, how are you?
Yeah, a couple of guys have told me I threw 65 pitches yesterday. No, that's not the case. No, I threw 2 innings, 32 pitches yesterday. So,
okay.
Yeah, for me, I'm on target. Where to ramp up here for two, with 4 starts to go 2, 3, 4, 5, and then be ready to throw 6 innings. When I do get to start. So physically, I feel good. Ready to be able to do that and ramp up for the season.
You also mentioned the not licking your fingers, maybe touching the back of your hair. These are things I imagine you've been doing since you were a kid, maybe spitting, just some habits. How weird is it going to be to train your brain, or how difficult to not do those things? I mean, is that just how are you going to do that?
Really, my licking the fingers has really come on about in the last few years, so it hasn't been terribly too long. For me, the hardest part is because I like to have the base of my hand where I like the moisture to get that last extra grip. So it's a little adjustment to try to find how to be able to touch just your hair with just the pads of your fingers. So that'll take some getting used to and figuring out how to make that work to make sure that I have a good grip of the ball.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Next up, Mark Zuckerman, MASNsports.com.
Hey, in your work with the union, the role that you have, obviously you're communicating, and being very involved in this whole thing. As this was all playing out, what sense were you getting from the other players as far as their biggest concerns about this season, the things they weren't concerned about? what did you kind of take away most about what kind of information you were getting from other players about all this?
In terms of the safety?
Yeah.
Well, just how are we going to be safe? Obviously this seems, when you have asymptomatic carriers, that this is inherently risky. And how could you mitigate that risk? That's kind of what we were wanting to hear from the experts and especially the CDC and the epidemiologists that thought, how could you do this? And when you start understanding, okay, you got to start worrying about your off-field behavior of making sure you avoid any high-risk situations. Make sure that you're getting tested at a frequency every few days to be able to catch a virus if somebody were to contract it. And then have protocols while you're at the field to make sure that you have multiple lines of defense if somebody were to get it. And the biggest thing, I guess, in my mind, that what this came back to is to prevent the spread. You can't prevent anybody from contracting the virus if they catch it away from the field. Our biggest concern is the spread of the virus and having it spread throughout a clubhouse. And so when you factor into testing and the fact that we have protocols and PPE in place to help prevent, even if there was somebody who were to contract it and be able to get through the testing system, that there's still even an additional line of defense to prevent a spread. To me, that kind of alleviates a lot of fears, at least for me, and then hopefully I was able to convey that to the other players.
All right, reminder, if you guys have a question for Max, click the raise hand button. See no hands raised right now. I'll give it a few more seconds, or else we'll let him go. Okay, we got Hannah Kaiser, Yahoo Sports.
Hey, Max. You mentioned sort of how you can't control whether or not guys will contract it away from the field. Is there a way you can mitigate that? Like, how are you talking to your teammates, particularly as a leader and as a veteran, about taking precautions when they're not at the ballpark?
Yeah, just make good choices. And, that's where when we start getting the release of the data from, these first intake tests that we're dealing with only 1%, positive rates, across the league. To me, that's actually pretty good, considering. And that if we can continue to, now that we have the season online, that, if you contract the virus, even if you're, if you don't have any symptoms, you're still going to hurt the ball club. And that raises the stakes up even more for players. And so I think just players in general are going to be in a more safe way, that they're going to want to not go to the bars and not partake in certain activities that would be deemed high risk. And so if you can really do the best you can to, really keep yourself from even being in situations to contract it, that's the best you can do off the field. And then when you have that on the line, with baseball here and we only have to play baseball here for a couple months. That's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make to be able to play baseball and go out there and do my job.
You mentioned how you had access to all this extra information, sort of seeing behind the scenes of how they were bringing these safety protocols together, getting into the clubhouse and being around all these other players. Did they have questions for you about that process?
No. Well, yes and no. Just throughout this whole process, I was in communication with my teammates as well. Doing Zoom calls left and right with those guys as well to make sure that those guys were informed, so that we could all make decisions together. And most importantly, that if they had any questions, I could take that back up the chain of command and ask those questions for those guys to be able to force the protocols where we needed to have them. So I really feel like our team did a great job of communicating amongst ourselves during the shutdown to make sure that we have the best information that we could, so that everybody was aware of the situations that were at stake, and to make sure that that everybody feels confident that they can step into the clubhouse and know that we're doing the best we can.